All right, let's get right to it. The big news right off the top. This within the last 45 minutes or so. Eddie, if you happen to have the breaking news sounder, we'll lead with it today. While obviously no ink, to my knowledge, has been put to paper, the numerous reports, first reported by ESPN, that Myles Turner has agreed to a 4-year contract with a 5th-year option with the Milwaukee Bucks. And so the Bucks, and there are several ways to interpret this. And we can get into the business aspect of it. We can get into the ramification aspect of it, all of those things. I will simply say this to begin, and I'm going to go back to what I said yesterday. When that ball was on the way to Tyrese Halliburton in game number 7, and Halliburton was moments away from catching that ball, making a move, and suffering injury. At no fault of Tyrese Halliburton. At no blame to Tyrese Halliburton. But basketball and sports in general are reactionary games. And everything changed when that ball was in the air. The trajectory, the game plan, the blueprint, the direction of the Indiana Pacers was entirely different than it was once Halliburton was laying on the ground and slapping that hardwood. That is a harsh reality, but that is a reality. That is not to say that immediately right then they said, okay, Myles Turner, we don't need him anymore. I'm not saying that. But your threshold for things, your willingness to go into things changes a bit. There is no doubt about the fact that if Halliburton is healthy, this team is, and this franchise is looking at it saying, we just got our first of, say, 3 spins of the wheel with this group to try to win an NBA championship. But when Halliburton went down, your timeline changes dramatically. And what did we say on this program, as did most? I'm not saying that it was an original thought, but everybody immediately thought this may change the Indiana Pacers' approach to the luxury tax and the amount of money that they want to pay Myles Turner. Myles Turner has, and through the shock of this for people, the incredulous acceptance of Myles Turner leaving, Myles Turner has played 708 games as an Indiana Pacer. Myles Turner has had times where he has been the chosen one, times where he's been the next face of the franchise, times where he was maligned by the fans for his play. And through it all, the one consistent thing has been Myles Turner in terms of him as a dude. He has been a solid citizen. He has been a solid teammate. He has been a solid part of this community. He has been very active within the community. But what it came down to the fact is that basketball is a business, and part of that business is to win games and continue to look around the corner. And for the Pacers, when they look at the contracts that they have right now on their roster, Aaron Nesmith is going to be up in 2 years, and he is going to be 27 years old. Andrew Nembhard's in a pretty good situation. They've got him locked in for 3 more. Pascal Siakam, they have locked in for 3 more years. And they're paying essentially max money for that. Benedict Mathurin, they have to now decide what happens, and maybe the trajectory of Mathurin changes because you don't know what level Halliburton is going to be when he returns, and you have to have an insurance policy there. And if they find out, if Mathurin next year plays at a very high level, and then Halliburton comes back and Halliburton is not at 100%, or there's a setback over the recovery, then they're going to have to pay Mathurin big money. And then you have Isaiah Jackson. Isaiah Jackson, who is coming also off of an Achilles injury, was a rising young player for them at the center position, and is younger than Myles Turner. Myles Turner will turn 30 in March. And I think what happened with the Pacers, as simply put, would be this. I believe, I don't know this, but I believe this. Several people asked me on my way in, like, what's your thought? What's your reaction? My reaction and my thought is this. My reaction and my thought is that in a vacuum, when you look at this simply from a roster and financial standpoint and a timeline standpoint, in order to retain Myles Turner, you were going to have to give money to him that was going to cause you to go over the salary cap ceiling and into the luxury tax. You knew nearly factually that the first year of paying that luxury tax, you were going to be paying a player to come back to a table that was not entirely set. You were bringing everybody back for Thanksgiving dinner, but the head chair was still empty. And you were saying, well, no, we're just doing this to keep everybody's reservation for Thanksgiving a year from now. And I think the Indiana Pacers looked at it and said, with Myles Turner, if we are going to sign him to a deal that is going to put us into the luxury tax, we are going to do so by basically going into the tax for a year that is just to tread water and hold serve. And then we're going to have Turner at that point beyond the age of 30, and we're going to be paying max money to a guy that perhaps could be then starting a decline, and a decline where this year, while I think he's a wonderful player who did a lot of things very, very well for them, at times when it mattered most, his physicality left to be desired. That's not a knock on him at all. I think he's a wonderful player, and I would rather have him than not. But I think the business aspect of that comes into play. Then the question becomes, what does Indiana now do with that vacant spot? Do they simply put all of their eggs in the basket of the hope of an Isaiah Jackson as your starter? Do they go out and then see and again kick the tires on a DeAndre Ayton, who might also go into the tax if you have to sign him? And it looks like he's very close, say, with the Lakers, unless something's happened in the last hour. And if you go with Ayton, do you do so because you're willing to say, we will go into the tax for DeAndre Ayton because he is 3 years younger than Myles Turner? These are all questions that will be answered, I would presume, within the next couple of days. But joining us now on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line on short notice, much appreciated, our friend from the Indianapolis Star, Dustin
Dopirak,
joining us with this news. Dustin, we'll begin with this. Before we get to what you think led to this departure of Myles Turner, let's go reverse here and go long-term first. The solution for Indiana now at center and where they turn, do you believe that they are caught all of a sudden stunned by this and therefore they're scrambling, or they knew this was a possibility and there is a center in waiting yet to be named?
I mean, I think it's something in the middle of that because, I mean, I would have expected if he was going to go elsewhere that the number was going to be higher. So if the other reporting I've seen that they were never willing to go over 3 years and 60, and I don't have that, I've just seen that elsewhere. But if they were never willing to go over 3 years and 60, they had to consider the possibility he was going to leave. Like there's, they had to think that there was a chance that they could lose him, and they had to be preparing for that. I mean, basically, if they started by saying, okay, now that Halliburton's out, we can't go into the tax. We were going to, but now this is a change in terms. We know that that's what we said we were planning on doing, but this is going to change. At that point, I think you have to, consider a realistic possibility you're going to lose the guy because you've totally changed, your bargaining posture the entire way. So you would have to think they have an idea, but I can't see what it is. I think, you look at what's around, you look at what's available, and you're like, okay, obviously DeAndre Ayton, like you I guess have to throw yourself into those negotiations. But you would think the Lakers are ahead of that, and I think you're still over the cap, so you can't, this is a situation where you're going after someone else's free agent. So it's not the same rules. I mean, like if he doesn't fit into the non-taxpayer mid-level, which I guess you still have access to, and I would need to talk to somebody who has a better sense of the cap than I do, but I think they do. If they're still under the tax, but I mean, that would be your only option. I think that caps out right around $14.2 million, somewhere in that range. So if you can fit him under that, then you can do it. But if you can't do it, or if DeAndre would just rather go to the Lakers, then you're scrambling, and there's not anybody available that's close. I mean, I was just looking at the free agent list on SpotRack, and your best options left are Moritz Wagner and Al Horford. And so I don't think it still seems like Orlando wants to keep Wagner, and then you're looking at 39-year-old Al Horford, and I don't think that's the situation you want to be in. That's the guy that you're targeting. So you have to look to make a trade or something along those lines and kind of see who's willing to part with somebody. And so in that case, you got to decide who you have to move. Who you're willing to move. And so, like, I still think even trading, you're going to have a hard time upgrading over Myles Turner. So, and even what you were going to get, 2 or 3 years for Myles Turner, even if you thought he was going to be in decline, I still think you'd have a hard time finding somebody who's going to be better than he will in 3 years.
Is Turner a better player for Indiana than he is player? And I mean that as no knock on Myles Turner. I'm saying, is Myles Turner, in other words, is this offense catered towards having a Myles Turner type player, and that limits who you can immediately plug in?
They'll find something to do with whoever else. I always come back to what Halliburton says about him, which I always find interesting, was that he thought after playing in Sacramento, he had a lob threat in Rashawn Holmes, and he felt like, okay, the guy that I'm going to work with is always going to be somebody I can just throw it up to and dunk off of pick and roll. He said, but, like playing with Myles told me that there's all these greater possibilities when you've got a real pick and pop threat at that 5 and a guy that can score at all 3 levels. He can roll, he can pop, he can short roll, he can do whatever you want. And it created all these extra possibilities, for Halliburton. And so, obviously they're not, it's not system based anyway. It's very, it's feel, it's flow, it's randomized action, all those kinds of things. And they just built up so much trust, over these years. And so whoever you get, he'll Halliburton will be able to eventually make things work with him. But you have 3 years here worth of, institutional knowledge, basically, of these guys working together and building chemistry, that, whoever they get is going to have to start over with a year from now, whenever Halliburton gets back, that he can play again. And so he's going to have to develop whatever he's going to develop with Andrew Nembhard and TJ McConnell, and then you bring Halliburton back and, have a whole new sense of what that's going to be. So it's certainly not going to be plug and play, because, you're losing all of that synergy that they've developed. So, that's going to be, it's going to be a chore. It's going to be a project, and it's hard, and so, they must be developing plans for something, and they're eventually going to get somebody. But, who that is, is not, it's not apparent. It doesn't stand out to you when it's us. You don't know what they're willing to give up, and, what somebody else might be willing to take at this point. But, you're basically, if you want to start a caliber center right now, it's going to cost you a player who's making 8 figures for you right now.
Dustin, are we, by chance, Dustin Dopirak is our guest from the Indianapolis Star Rhinegeist Brewery guest line, talking about the fact within the last hour, now known Myles Turner on his way to Milwaukee. The Bucks have waived Damian Lillard to make room for that. There was discussion that Giannis was not happy about the waiving of Damian Lillard. However, Giannis was actively recruiting Myles Turner. So Milwaukee, perhaps there's a little bit of a power shift there with a team that is somewhat of a rival within the division, but more specifically the East. Dustin, are we perhaps forgetting about the athleticism that was shown, and are we now trusting that Kevin Pritchard, Chad Buchanan, and Rick Carlisle have seen enough in terms of the health status of Isaiah Jackson that they may in fact have a player that is familiar on roster that is the closest to what Myles Turner does of anybody that you're going to be able to find elsewhere?
Well, Isaiah still doesn't shoot. So, I don't know. If he figured it out over the course of rehab, but how many 3-pointers does he hit his career?
Right.
And it's so it's Isaiah's I view it as there's a possibility you keep Isaiah, and certainly they've made it a qualifying offer, but he hasn't signed yet. Number one. Obviously he also becomes a trade chip if he got a $6.4 million offer and he takes it. But he's effective. Obviously, I'm not trying to downplay that. I think you saw a lot of growth from him and whatnot. But it's a long way from being what Myles Turner brings you. He can be a real lob threat. He's a better lob threat than Myles was. And he can rebound. He can block shots. He is effective if he's at 100%. Now I'm interested to see what he looks like, because he put on weight, and I think it's good weight. but I'm not sure. I don't know how it changes him.
Right,
Okay, like
I would
I don't
agree
know
with
what
that.
his explosion looks like. So and I think he needed to put on weight, but I mean I don't know what it was like. And not only that, don't know what it will be like. I mean, it's just interesting to see. It's a new element. And what it's going to be like when he because obviously he can slowly get back to doing cardio, and he'll certainly trim some of that off as he gets back to playing basketball. But he's going to look different than he did, and so it's going to be like, okay, well, does it cost him something? Does it give him something new? Like what kind of player is Isaiah Jackson coming off an Achilles tendon tear? And these things all heal at different levels. I mean, I think Jahlil Okafor had one not too long ago, and I just remember seeing him in the first couple games with the Mad Ants, and you're thinking, okay, well, what's this guy mean? What's he going to be like? And it really just seemed like he was dragging the leg that he had the Achilles tendon tear in. Like it just seemed like he was dead weight, and he was doing whatever he could just to bring it along with him, like it was an anchor. So how is that going to be when he gets on the floor? And so that's a risk. I mean, like I guess my bottom line is I can't imagine that they're putting all of their chips on Isaiah Jackson. That's the reason to let Myles Turner walk.
Did the Pacers just lose in a game of chicken?
I mean, maybe if they started, certainly they could have. I mean, if they, like obviously they were in a game of chicken that, like my presumption is the management team must have been sort of undercut by this. If it's like, all right, they were certainly undercut by the idea of the Halliburton injury to start with, and like I imagine that they still wanted to pay the tax because it's not their money. But like if they were told from on high, from Herb and everybody else, like, okay, like, nah, we're not willing to do this, so get this done for this number or else, then they probably did have to play chicken. They probably lost, and they probably knew that there was a chance they were going to lose if they couldn't go up to this number. I mean, I think like 27-28, I think is would have put them over. Actually, I'm not even sure. I'm trying to remember what they would have to do to get to the tax exactly. And so if their view was like, just make the offer that keeps you under the tax, and if they can't do it, then you're going to lose. Like, then yes, I guess bottom line, the only thing they could have been banking on is that nobody had cap room to pay him. And so they would have just been banking on the idea that no one was going to clear it. And Milwaukee happened to be a team that had the opportunity to do it if they were going to do something else that was more than a little bit bold. So I think that in a way is the chicken game, I guess. But I mean, I think they had to presume there was a chance they were going to lose it if they were going to fall far short of what they had to expect the expectation was going to be.
Dustin, did the window close?
I mean, it's definitely a different window. It's tough to say right now. I mean, you don't want to rule out the possibility that they've got something up their sleeve that I just don't see right now. They've made a lot of smart moves over the last couple of years and pulled off some things that either A, I didn't think they could, or B, just didn't see on the table, or C, nobody saw on the table. Or just they happened to get somebody who ended up producing at a level that that there hadn't been any kind of track record to suggest. So, I mean, maybe, but it definitely is a situation for sure. It's a dramatic changing of this group. This is a group of Pacers. This is an era of Pacers that is, in a manner of speaking, has ended. And that doesn't mean that they can't put together a really competitive team this year. It doesn't mean they can't put together a really competitive team next year. But like, there's a part of their soul is lost. I mean, like Myles was a part of the soul of this team, and that being gone, I think, is something that changes things. It's going to be a team that functions differently. It's going to be a team that reacts differently. This is going to be weird for them. Like in terms of like a decision made by management that basically cost them one of their captains, and so I think it's going to be a different vibe over there. And so I don't know. I mean, like, I can't say that it's closed. I can't say that they cannot put together a championship team in a year that there's no moves they can make. I don't think. I think that would be selling them way short. But it definitely kind of feels like this was a group together, and it's at the very least an era that's changed and it's kind of moved on. But again, they can still put together a lot of these pieces and keep together a lot of these pieces and have a competitive team, and that can then end up catching fire again. You can't rule them out, but it definitely changes things dramatically.
Dustin, short notice, I realize. Busy day. I know still plenty to chase on this. I guess I'll wrap it up by asking this, and I keep going back to this in the back of my mind, crazy as it may sound, and it's because I always talk about precedent. I'm a guy of precedent, right? There is precedent that the Pacers have had interest in the skill set of DeAndre Ayton. They may be joining that fray too late, or maybe they were involved and we didn't know it in terms of early. Do you believe there is still a chance that Ayton is in play?
I mean, I'm sure there's a chance. I imagine, certainly they have history and whatnot, so, I mean, they could put in a call. I don't want to rule that out entirely. So, I mean, I think that's going to be one of the first things I mention is that, at least he's a guy that's available. I don't know. But, I mean, I would also think if things are pretty far along with the Lakers already, I feel like that'd be a hard thing to walk away from.
We appreciate the time, Dustin. We'll continue watching it, and we'll talk to you soon, all right? Appreciate it.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Dustin Dopirak on a return visit to the program, or the station, I should say, today. Myles Turner, we now know, apparently on his way to Milwaukee. Eddie Garrison, your initial reaction when you heard this?
I thought it was when I first started to read it, I was like, okay, Myles Turner signs a contract, 4 years, 107. I was like, all right, cool. That's, solid deal for Turner. Nice job by his agent to get it done. And I had to double check it. I was like, wait, he went to the rival? He went to the Milwaukee Bucks? So that was certainly shocking in that regard. But I understand the hesitancy from the Pacers ownership of not wanting to go into the tax, like you mentioned, of how everything about your future changes with 1 second like that, like with Tyrese when he tore his Achilles. It's going to sting for a little bit around town, but I think the Pacers know what they're doing. They're going to have a plan in place because you certainly have to weigh all options when you're making these sort of things. And I'm interested to see if there's any more on what the Pacers' final offer was to Turner. I know there was the report, I think it was from Jake Fisher, that it was 3 years, $60 million is what the Pacers offered him. I saw another one saying that ESPN had 3 for $75 on the offer for Turner, and it just seems like Myles was very adamant on that 4th year and having a player option on that 4th year nonetheless.
I would like to know the following, and I have my own thought on this. Myles Turner has been a very popular player with the Pacers. I know at times polarizing. He's been a lightning rod at times of people that get frustrated with him, but I think during this run and this marriage between the city and the organization that has taken place over the last handful of months in particular, he's been one of the pieces that has drawn people in with a lot of love. His letter that he wrote to the city, I think at the time, I remember saying that I thought he was moving the chess piece there, and he was kind of putting the onus on the Pacers. And now, because it is Milwaukee where he's going, I'd like to know the reaction of fans. Are you mad at Myles Turner? Are you mad at the Pacers? Or are you mad simply at the basketball gods? 239-1070 is the telephone number. It is at that number over the course of today that we will also give away tickets to Dave Matthews, July 11th. We got 2 pair to give away. But this topic of Myles Turner, I have always said when it comes to professional sports, in any other line of work, we all know that kid in like 3rd grade. For me, it was Brian Schilling. Good buddies with Brian Schilling. Then one day he said like, oh yeah, my family's moving. We're moving. What, you're moving to where? Columbus, Ohio. Why? My dad got a job promotion, got more money. And you say to somebody like, man, it's disappointing that Jerry's moving. But, his company gave him like a $30,000 raise. Well, yeah, you'd have to move. I'd move to Fairbanks for $30,000. But when a player has the opportunity to make an additional $47 million, then we start pounding our fist about loyalty. Where's your loyalty? You should have been loyal. But we don't know. Were the Pacers loyal to Myles Turner? Or was this one where both came to the table, both looked at each other and said, it's really hard. It's really hard. But you know what? Maybe it's just time and it's best for both of us to go see other people. The difference being it doesn't look like the Pacers right now have anybody else necessarily on their dance card. We shall see. 239-1070, the telephone number. We will continue the discussion. Stephen Holder, 1 o'clock today. Scott Agness, 2 o'clock. plenty of talk about this news with Myles Turner, and we'll get more into what I think was the backstory on it when we return. before we get to calls, and we have several lined up. I appreciate it. And I'm curious, just overall reaction here. If the Pacers, several have asked this, and yes, it gets into a very gray area. But in terms of, Jake, what does it mean if the Pacers were trying to avoid the luxury tax? Essentially what that means is this, and I'm not going to give specific numbers because it would be disingenuous of me to say that I totally understand the level of numbers, but I'll just put it in generic terms. This year, for example, the tax level, in other words, the ceiling. So every team gets an email that says, hey guys, NBA here. For this season, you are not to exceed $170.8 million. Your total payroll has to be under $170.8 million. Now, if you need to go over that or want to go over that, you can do so, but you are going to be taxed. And the tax that you will pay on that is dependent upon how much you go over it. The tax rate starts at $1.50 for every dollar you're over the limit, okay? And then there are categories. And I don't know the categories, but just for example, if you go, let's say that if it's 170.8 and your payroll is 185.8, then you owe $1.50 for every dollar you're over. So if you're $15 million over, boom, you owe the NBA an additional $22.5 million. And then at some point, like if it's maybe it's $30 million, there's another bracket, and then it goes to $250 per dollar. So let's say you're $30 million over. Well, you've gone to $30 million now, so it's $250 for every dollar over. So $30 million plus another $250 of 250% of that, et cetera, et cetera. There are teams, the Lakers come to mind, the Celtics, I'm sure, have done this, that they look at it and they say, it's worth it for us to go over and pay that fee because either A, we have a team lined up that we are confident will win us a championship, or B, we are living in a market where we're just printing money and we are literally like, drying our hands with hundreds. Well, if that's the case, then you can afford to do that. That's the disadvantage of an Indiana, ironically, a Milwaukee, et cetera, because you don't have the market size to be able to bring in some of the external revenue. And for the Pacers, there is no doubt, and I am here to tell you 100% factually, I am as sure about this as I am the fact that my name is Jake Query. I am certain that the Indiana Pacers were prepared and willing to go into the luxury tax to retain Myles Turner so long as they were bringing back their entire team that just came within 3/4 of an NBA title. But the injury changed everything. And then I think Indiana had pause, and there is the possibility that Indiana said, well, let's still talk to Myles and see what we can figure out here, not realizing that Milwaukee was scheming behind the scenes going, you know what, we're going to come in and blow this guy away with what we offer him. And they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. To the phone lines we go. Jeremy spoke on the show today. We'll lead him off with him. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, how are you, Jake?
Good.
So my question is this. Is there a chance here that this is mismanagement? Or is this something going on behind the scenes that we're unaware that's happening? Because on the surface, this looks like a terrible fit for Myles Turner besides the money. To go play in a Doc Rivers offense with Giannis inside already? Like, I get it opens up more threes, but then at the same time, is there the possibility the Pacers went to Myles and said, hey, we're looking to pull the trigger on something here. This is the best we can offer you, or maybe we're ready to move on from you?
Okay, when you say mismanagement, you mean mismanagement, Jeremy, on whose behalf?
Like common Pacer PTSD. I mean, we've had the Paul George incident. We've had the Oladipo incident. We're used to guys saying they want to be here and then bailing.
Right.
In no way, shape, or form do we think Myles Turner is that guy. But we also know, as a history of our franchise, this can happen.
Jeremy,
so
I think
it's just shocking. Oh, go ahead.
I think part of it's this, and I'll give you a C, which is going to sound like I'm hedging here, okay? But I truly believe this. I truly think the most plausible and likely answer is C, which was Myles Turner has a great love and appreciation for the Indiana Pacers, and the Indiana Pacers have a great love and appreciation for Myles Turner. But Myles Turner realized he's in a point in his career where he had particular needs. The Indiana Pacers realized that they are in a circumstance where some of their needs are on delay. And so, therefore, the timing just didn't work out for the two of them to continue their relationship.
Do you think that would have changed their draft mentality, though, or their free agency aggressiveness if they knew this was coming? Like, the window was just so tight.
Okay, excellent question on the draft mentality, and that is a fair one, unless they did not feel that there was a player that was an immediate replacement for him available at 38. You know what I mean? Yes, but your point is a good one in the fact that now, in terms of aggression through free agency, if they knew this was a possibility, the guy that they would have gone out to get if they knew Myles Turner was walking is still available out there in DeAndre Ayton. I mean, it was a pretty dry center year in terms of the free agency. It was a dry period. Pam is up next. Appreciate the call, Jeremy. Pam is female listener number 22. Hi, Pam. Unless you've called before in which you're part of the original 21.
I have called before. I called you when you were in the morning show, and then I called a little bit later and got tickets to the Grand Prix, which was awesome because now I've been to every kind of race at the 500.
All right, well, you're awesome. Still so you're female listener 19. Okay, all right, what's up, Pam?
Yep. So I think Tyrese's injury changed everything. From what I saw when Tamika Catchings got injured with her Achilles, she was out a year. The next year she came back, she wasn't really herself. It wasn't until the next year. So if we're using that same schedule with Tyrese, okay, he's out next year. He comes back the next year, but not really himself. The Pacers really want to pay Myles over this salary cap for him for those 2 years when we really don't have Tyrese?
Right. I mean,
doesn't make a lot of sense.
Pam, I appreciate it. And you know what, Pam? I also appreciate the logical understanding of that. And I think people deep down do understand it, but emotions come into play, which I get. Pete, you're on the air.
Keith, not Pete.
My bad. Keith.
That's okay. I'm dancing right now that his ass is gone. Look at the numbers during the finals. He did nothing. Hartenstein and Holmgren dogged him during the finals. Bye, Myles.
Okay, Keith. I'm guessing Keith wanted Myles Turner gone. I get it. Like I said, polarizing guy. Dave. What up, Dave?
Good afternoon.
It's morning to me, Dave. It is morning to me. And not morning like in terms of like emotionally. I mean, yes, it is still the first half of my day.
Totally agree. Hey, I think it's everything that you're saying. I think it was an injury. Myles did kind of he slowed down in the series a little bit. It seemed like we weren't using him as much late in the series. But in that retrospect, it looks like it's a good trade for Myles. So he's going somewhere where he thinks he can win something later in his career too. So I'm okay with it. It's all good on both parties. I have faith in the top brass that we'll get it back on track and we'll find the right people. So, I think it's good for both parties, to be honest with you.
Dave, I'll tell you, and I appreciate, again, the clarity there of thought. There is part of it, though, that's just like, man. Man. You know, when Halliburton went down, and I don't want to put this on, it's totally unfair to sit here and put that on the injury because now it feels like you're putting everything on, like Tyrese Halliburton, like somehow let things down. But there is no doubt, as a Pacer fan and that piano on fishing wire hanging above your head, that you're sitting there saying to yourself, you just knew this is how it was going to go down. And it's so disappointing to say it that way because you want to have faith. You want to have – Kevin Pritchard has been masterful in trade. There's no doubt about it. He's been masterful in trade. You know, we thought it was the end of the franchise as we knew it when Paul George left. We thought it was the end of the franchise as we knew it when Victor Oladipo left. And when I say left, I mean, said they didn't want to come back, had to be traded, and you got it. We thought it was the end as we knew it when Domas Sabonis was out the door. And each time the Pacers have come back. But the challenge is there again. Stephen Holder in just under 20. Greg J, stick around. We got Dave Matthews tickets to give away today as well on this Tuesday, newsy Tuesday that we didn't necessarily expect. It's Query & Company on the Fan. I don't agree with Sean, who just posted this to me on the X Post Twitter. Jake, Herb Simon is cheap. It'll never be Indiana as long as he or the Simons own the team. I totally disagree. The Simons were totally candid and open about the fact that they were willing to go into the tax to retain Myles Turner. I truly believe this, okay? All of us have been in this situation. Here's a good example. I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to put anybody in a bad spot here, but I was talking with a friend recently, and we were talking about a past relationship. I said, yeah, she was great. We had, the several times I think the four of us went out, and Shannon really liked her too. She was great. What happened with that? You know what, Jake? She was a great girl, and really, we had a great time, no question. Well, then what happened? What it came down to was like we kind of just knew in the end there that we were just in different periods of our life. And I had a lot going on with work and was kind of focused in on that. And she had already kind of gone through all that and now was looking for somebody that she could, kind of settle down with and travel. And I still was a couple of years away from being able to do those things. And it just got to the point where even though we had a very amicable breakup, the timing just wasn't right for us. And so we just eventually it just kind of fizzled and we broke up. We all know people like that. We all have dated people like that. And I don't think this was something where the Pacers and Myles Turner sat across from each other at a table and were yelling back and forth, and Turner got up and said, fine, then I'm just going to leave. And I don't think that they were sitting across the table and the Pacers said, fine, you know what, fine. You think you can find something else better out there? Go do it. I don't think it's either of those two things. I think they sat down and the Pacers said, Myles, here's the thing. We have Andrew Nembhard under a contract that we just gave him more money. We have Aaron Nesmith for 2 more years. We gave Siakam a big deal, and we gave Halliburton a big deal. And we have some money here, and we were willing to go even beyond what is within our budget to retain you. But just in looking at it, the uncertainty of knowing the situation of where we are as a team forces us to kind of have to just step back a little bit and reevaluate whether or not we want to pay this, because if we're going to pay you for a 3 or 4 year deal, realistically, it's only going to be in years 3 and 4 when we truly feel that we are going to be at full strength. And to be at full strength, we're going to have to still retain some of your other teammates. And B, to be at full strength, we're going to hope that you then at the age of 32 and 33 are the same player you were at 28 and 29. And Myles, we love you, and we know you love us. And you've been a wonderful part of this community and a wonderful part of this franchise. And we could not have asked for anything better for a guy that played 708 games for us. But the timing right now just might not be there in terms of where we each are in our lives. And I think it might be as simple as that. Greg can opine. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Jake. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, enjoy your program a
Well,
lot.
You and my mom, that's two people, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's good. I think, all this stuff is true. I think the Simons could open up the checkbook a little bit, and I think that Myles, he's been great here. I think that the one thing I wanted to mention really on this is the fact that he went to the Bucks. I think that the Pacers thought that there weren't going to be a lot of suitors because everybody's over the cap or whatever. And then the Bucks come up with this, hey, we're just going to waive Damian Lillard. And the report's out there that Giannis isn't really happy because he brought Lillard into that organization. They just waived him and somehow could waive all his money over a period of years, and they can pick up Turner and not even, bat an eye, not going to luxury tax or whatever. It's like that. I think that's crazy. I think we got fooled at the table. And it's unfortunate, but I agree with the business decision. But him to go to the Bucks, and we have to see him, and he's our divisional rival. It's like in football, you don't trade your number one player to to Jacksonville or Houston or whoever. And so, a little bit frustrated with that. And also wanted to add, did somebody reach out to JMV and do a wellness check on him, because he's got to be devastated over this.
You know what? I've not seen John. One of our coworkers just told me that they saw him, and John was like, "Hey, John, I hope the best for Myles in Milwaukee." I think was John. I'm not going to speak for John. He'll be on. All the more reason to stay tuned to this radio station coming up at 3 o'clock when John joins, as he's back in the mix today. Brian is up next. Hi, Brian.
Hey, what's going on? I'm not mad at either party. I wouldn't pay a luxury tax for Myles because I don't think he performed that well in the playoffs, and that's when you expect your players to really shine. And I can't blame Myles for going after the money. He's got a family. He's got to look for, take care of himself. So, it's sports. I ring it up to sports, and I wasn't a big Myles Turner fan, but, it is what it is, and I'm not upset with either party.
Yeah, Brian, I think that's a very sound, and that's sounding like kind of the consensus from people. We'll see if Chris rounds it out with the same thought of the understanding I think people have of the fact that everything changed with the injury. Chris, your thoughts?
My thought was we went from Roy Hibbert, Block City, to Myles Turner, Block City. What can a fan expect to see in the next big man we have?
I think, Chris, it's a great question, and I appreciate it. My personal thought, I think Indiana, the way this team is constructed, and, between Siakam, the style they play, the speed in which they play, I think they still want to do that. And I think they want to maintain that same flow to keep the car running, if you will, for when Halliburton comes back. This is kind of like, I'm going to use a bad analogy. I'm the king of that. It's the bad analogy sounder, right? People really went to fish, and they're like, dude, that's just incredible. If you watch a 24-hour endurance race like the Rolex 24, there's always that stint, that's what we call it, that driving shift from like midnight to 4 a.m. that's usually like, I'm not going to say the weakest driver, but the least heralded driver of the four that make up the team that drive it over the course of 24 hours. And when that guy's in the car while the superstar is catching up on rest and your closer is catching up on rest, that guy's job is to just keep the car running at essentially the same speed and the same cylinders and within the same window of the front of the race leaders, so that when the anchor comes back and the best driver comes back and is refreshed and ready and gets in the car, then you can make a burst and try to get yourself back up towards the front and win the race. And I think the Pacers right now for this season, that's how they're approaching it. And probably even a season and a half until Halliburton comes back. So they want to maintain some level of stability of flow of play, and therefore I think they go out and try to get a center that plays in the same style. I don't think you can rule out DeAndre Ayton unless something has happened in the last hour of which I'm unaware of him signing somewhere. It certainly seems as though the Pacers would be getting into that derby late. And Ayton maybe prices out of, as did Turner, what they can pay. But maybe they're willing to go into the tax for an Ayton because he is younger than Turner. But having said all of that, I think they are now in a position where, and also a guy that is a free agent, but I think they're in a position where they really are going to have to show a belief that Isaiah Jackson can continue on the trajectory that he was showing before he himself had an Achilles injury. And then outside of that, I mean, you got Tony Bradley in the mix. Thomas Bryant has yet to resign. So there are, you are in a real situation here at the center position for certain. And is there a trade that needs to be made? The one thing we know is they've got a guy that's pretty savvy with in trades that is still pulling the strings for them. Stephen Holder joins us and does so next. There have been, without question, some unbelievable rival moments between the Pacers and the Bucks the last handful of years, Bobby Portis being the epicenter of that. Obviously, the countdown of Giannis at the free throw line. You know, Damian Lillard, tell you the fascinating thing, really the fascinating thing of the NBA playoffs of 2025, and that is the fact that you had two key injuries that we as Pacer fans, media, citizens of Indianapolis witnessed with our very eyes. The first was the Damian Lillard Achilles, and then bookended essentially by the Tyrese Halliburton Achilles. And both of those have become key factors in the biggest news of the offseason for the Pacers, of that of Myles Turner, because it was due to the Damian Lillard Achilles tear that Milwaukee was able to release him to make room to pay Myles Turner. And it was due to the Tyrese Halliburton Achilles tear that the Pacers, then everything changed in terms of their willingness to go into the luxury tax and go over the ceiling to bring back Myles Turner, knowing that they were going to be at minimum 1 year and perhaps a year and a half to two away from back to full form with Myles Turner in the mix. And so those two things now land Myles Turner into Milwaukee, a 4-year reported $107 million deal. Joining us now on the Ryan Geist Brewery guest line, he is, of course, primarily the Colts writer for ESPN.com. He also covered the Pacers' postseason run. Stephen Holder joining us. Stephen, before we get to Colts stuff, and there is news to talk about because training camp, we now know the dates, we know the scheduling, etc., but let's begin from the Pacers' standpoint and just your overall reaction to this news that Myles Turner is leaving Indiana, where he has played 708 games, was the longest tenured Pacer on the roster. That now goes to T.J. McConnell. Myles Turner on his way to Milwaukee. The thoughts of Stephen Holder.
Yeah, I mean, it is a reminder that sports is, it's a pretty cold bucket of water sometimes, and nothing lasts forever. Even our greatest heroes, they move on at some point, and I'm not putting Myles Turner in that category. I'm just saying there is some, there's an emotional tie there. There's no question about that. I have a picture somewhere of my daughter high-fiving Myles very early in his career, a game we went to. I don't remember the circumstances, but she came into proximity with him, and she's so young in the picture. I look at it, right? And she's now 16. She's about to start driving. You know what I'm saying? Like, that puts it in perspective. It's crazy. That picture for me tells the entire story. I think it's a video too or something. But like that, every time I see that, it reminds me, like, damn, he's been here a long time.
Right.
And
been
that
a solid citizen,
perspective.
right? I mean, that's the big thing. He's been a
100%.
solid citizen here, right?
He has. Look, in spite of a lot of criticism, because that's the thing. We always want players on our favorite teams to be more than what they are, instead of sometimes just appreciating them for what they do provide. And I think that was the case with Myles Turner. In a lot of people's minds, he was never going to live up to whatever it was they expected him to be. I don't know what that was, but whatever that was, he didn't live up to it. But if you could take a step back and just say, all right, let's appreciate the guy for what he is. Let me ask you this. I mean, do the Pacers make that run without Myles Turner? I say probably not.
No question, they do
right?
not.
I mean,
they do not.
I think there's no question. So he is a huge part of the most successful Pacers season in a generation. I mean, or maybe ever, right? In the NBA at least. So what are we even talking about? You know what I'm saying? So I just think we have to think about it in those terms. And the last thing I would say is you talked about me covering football and basketball, and I'll give you a 2-for-1. You know what I thought about when you were outlining those injuries? Not the same thing, and I don't want to be dramatic, but I started thinking, damn, this feels like the Andrew Luck situation, not in terms of the future, but in terms of just how it changed fortune.
Yeah, the timeline trajectory changes, right? It's a boulder in the stream, right?
Yes. Remember, when Andrew Luck got hurt, the Colts were one season removed, originally got hurt, right? The original injury, 2015, they were one season removed from the AFC Championship game, and they have yet to be heard from since. So now, again, Tyrese and Andrew Luck are different people, and I don't anticipate Tyrese riding off into the sunset anytime soon. He'll be back. I have faith in that. The Achilles repair process now is fantastic. The success rate is really good. But that being said, I'm just talking about it in terms of changing fortunes. In the short term, it absolutely is a reality.
Stephen, listen, here's my concern. And I know, and I want to make sure people understand this. I mean, I know, Stephen Holder, that you are primarily a Colts writer, but you covered the NBA playoffs, covering the Pacers, so you know your stuff in this regard as well.
Sure. And my background is from covering the NBA years too. So yeah.
Myles Turner, to answer your first point, when Myles Turner was drafted, we were a city clamoring for a hero. We'd seen Reggie Miller.
Yeah.
Then Paul, we kept waiting for who was going to be the next Reggie Miller, right? And, we thought maybe it was going to be Artest or Jermaine, and then the brawl happens. And then from the ashes comes Paul George, who develops before our very eyes and becomes a superstar. And then when Paul George leaves, it's like, well, wait a minute. We have this young guy out of Texas that was a top 15 pick. The Pacer fans were not used to seeing top 15 picks around here.
That's true.
And so they get Myles Turner, and because of where he was drafted, it's like, well, that's it. He's the guy. That's the new face of the franchise. And and that's unfair to place on him. So he had unfair expectations for a number of things going against him from the get-go. But he was a solid player, and not only that, he was a unique player. And I'm saying this like he's not still with us. I mean, for the Pacers.
Right. Sure.
He was a unique player when he arrived because of the fact that he was this hybrid-level center. And as a result of that, and this is my concern, and then, Stephen, I want you to walk me off this ledge. My one concern about this is, as great as Halliburton is and as fast as Halliburton can play, a large part of the way this Indiana Pacer team has been built is based on Myles Turner. He is actually the most important straw in the drink because of his defensive ability to alter shots and then facilitate transition the other way quickly, trail behind and hit threes where you've got to always account for him. That's a very difficult thing to replicate, and I worry that whoever they now get at that center position, they are so specifically built with Myles Turner as the key piston. Talk me off that ledge.
That is actually a fair concern, I think. And so I guess I'm not talking you off the ledge. But I think concern is fair. I mean, worry, I don't know if that's the word yet, but it is difficult to replicate. I think that's absolutely true. There's no question about it. I mean, they were built very specifically. The construction of this team was, I think, its greatest attribute. I mean, we talk about the individual parts all the time, but let's be honest, the way it was built and with whom it was built is why it worked. Okay? Like, that is pretty clear. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton, this was not his first NBA team. Okay? Let's be clear about that. There's something different about the pieces here and how they were put together. And that's an oversimplification, but I think there's something to that. What I'd also add is that the good news is that there are more big guys who play like Myles now. He was almost ahead of his time when he got here, right? I mean, because that wasn't necessarily his style wasn't necessarily the prevailing style of every big man in the NBA at the time, but it has become more so that, I think, over the last 10 years. That doesn't mean that everybody can do it at his level, and that's the problem. I think the versatility that you talked about is his rim protection, but also the ability to get out and run and stretch the floor, stretch the defense. That will be difficult to replace if Tyrese comes back in a year or so, whenever it is, and they don't have that. His job gets harder. There's no doubt about that, and the pace slows as well. So I'm definitely interested to see. Now, what I will say is they could use some more rebounding. This is a chance to really double down on that and to really get a rebounding force, and that will also help them get the ball out and run as well, because they gave up a lot of rebounds in the playoffs where I think they left a lot of points on the board.
That's my one thing is, Stephen, they They still need, even if Turner had been brought back, they need one big, just pillar type. And again, I don't.
Yep.
I'm going to say this one more time, and I know I'm going to sound crazy. I don't rule out the possibility that DeAndre Ayton is still explored. Now, I think he might be.
I actually thought that made sense when I saw he was out there. I thought it made sense.
Because Ayton is a guy that I think can be a back-to-the-basket center if that's what you need to play this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then he can be a transitional center if that's what you need to play next year. And he's younger than Turner. But you, again, would have to go into the tax, and then the question becomes, are they willing to go into the tax for an unknown quantity and one that apparently, I think has probably been more of, I don't know that he's a bad guy, but I don't know that he's the citizen in a locker room as Myles Turner has been. But, those are questions that they would know and I would not, and that's why they have scouts to look at those things. All right, Stephen Holder, our
guest.
I
also wonder what it costs. I also wonder what
well, that's what I mean. You're going to have to go into the tax, et cetera, and can you get away? Can you sell the owner on going into the tax for an unknown entity as opposed to a known one?
Tougher sell.
Stephen Holder, our guest. Ryan Geist Brewery guest line is where you hear his voice. ESPN.com, where you see his work. Let's get to the Colts now. In terms of, we will talk plenty more about Myles Turner, everybody, here for the remainder predominantly of the show. But the reality is, Colts about to get underway here. The training camp schedule has been released. The one thing I notice about that is I know I'm getting older because training camp used to be absolutely like the most laborious long thing for players, and now it feels like summer camp, right?
Yeah. I mean, the latest collective bargaining agreement that they signed a few years ago, it really did, I think, take a hammer to the training camp schedule, because here's what this is about. The one thing, when they do negotiations, owners don't like to give up anything that's going to cost them money. Okay, so what can you give up that doesn't cost you money? Give players their time, right? And what do the owners care? Oh, they got a shorter training camp? That's the coach's problem. That ain't my problem. So they negotiate these CBAs, and the coaches will figure it out. We all got the same disadvantage: less practice in training camp. That's not my problem. And so this is what you get. And the players feel like they get a win. They get days off in training camp. They have a ramp-up period where they have, I think, they have to go 3 days before they can put the pads on and actually hit. They have limitations on how much they can hit. I mean, it's every old-timer I talk to who comes out to practice, they just laugh. And honestly, I would say this. There is a huge argument to be made that players will have more longevity with this approach. So it's not all just about the players are soft. It's not about that necessarily, right? There is a component to this where sports science people say, and their research shows, that there is a longevity component to this. Now, there's also the other side of that, which is you have to balance that with, you have to get the team ready to play and to face the physical rigors of an NFL season. So that's a balancing act, and they'll have to figure that out. I would say, in closing, Shane Steichen, I would say he leans more toward, I think, giving them a little more grace rather than going harder. Although this year, he said they may ramp things up a little bit. So we'll see.
I was going to ask you, well, we talk so much about the quarterback position, right? I mean, that's obviously the big storyline. And there are other positions we'll talk about with the Colts. But Shane Steichen, now entering year number 3, needs to improve where?
So I think he is, and people around the league agree with this too, because I ask a lot of opinions. And people think he's smart, he's sharp, they like his offensive philosophies. Where I see a problem sometimes is just situationally. It's not that he's a bad play caller. That's not the problem. I don't think that at all. What I wonder sometimes is like, okay, why did you do that there and then? And what's your thought process there? Now, it might just be completely unrelated, but I just think sometimes there's some critical situations where I would just like you to do make the easy call as opposed to doing something more audacious. And I can't think of an example right now, but I just wonder, in some key situations sometimes I just don't quite follow his logic. there also are some fourth down situations where, and I'll preface this by saying I'm a big fan of being aggressive, going for it, etc. But I think there's also a feel to that, right? And how are you playing on that day? What's going on with your quarterback, et cetera, et cetera? How's the defense playing? The other team's defense. There are times when I'm like, yeah, they're not getting this, and I just wonder where his thought process is sometimes. Those are the key things. I think the other question I've had, and I don't know this answer. It's just more like thinking out loud. I think everybody agrees Shane Steichen is a good offensive coach. My question that still remains unanswered, because I don't think we know, is he a good head coach? You know what I'm saying? There's a big difference. There's a big difference. And I think that's the question that this season will answer for us, frankly.
Stephen, to you, Stephen Holder, our guest, ESPN.com, he's on the Ryan Geist Brewery guest line. When you look at training camp in general, if you are the Colts, I'll put it to you this way. If you're Chris Ballard, you're saying to yourself, I'm really happy about this fact. Everybody's so focused on our quarterback battle that what they don't realize is it's good news for guys at this position because we got a real battle here, but I think people aren't going to realize that it's such an open and heated competition because they're focused on the quarterback position. That group of players is in which room?
So I would say, surprisingly, it might be at cornerback. I mean, they've got. It's not that they have this excess of riches per se, but they do have. If everyone stays healthy, and I realize we're talking about the Colts here, but they have an interesting mix back there. I mean, obviously they made the big signing with Charvarius Ward, so he's going to play. He probably doesn't come off the field, so he raises the bar. But then they have Jones coming back. They have certainly this new pick, Justin Wally, I think third-round pick from Minnesota. He is really interesting, and they're really intrigued by him. I think he's going to play a lot more than people think. I'm not sure what his role is, but they're going to play a lot more coverages than we've seen in the past. This year you could see some dime packages, which is 6 defensive backs. And so much so that they seem to not really care at all about the linebackers or the fact that they don't have any experienced linebackers. So I'm interested to see how that all plays out together. I mean, you still have, for example, Kenny Moore's still in the fold, and he is who he is. You still have Juju Brents, and he's trying to show that he has something there. I mean, you're not counting on him because he hasn't been able to help you so far. But if he ever pulls it together, maybe he's a player. So they could go from what I thought was a very undermanned position last year to maybe this is a position where they actually have some depth, maybe at least a little bit. So we'll see what happens. And Sam Womack comes back as well. He was a good pickup from San Francisco last year. We'll see. I think it has the potential to be a surprising position for the Colts.
Okay, Stephen, before we let you go, I'm going to recap, but I'm going to tell you the places I just went on my annual road trip. I want to know if you've been to any of them. You ready?
All right, shoot.
Okay. Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts.
I never have, but I need to go.
Okay, it's in a mall, by the way. Like you walk in, and it's like there's a Cold Stone Creamery and a Subway, and then the Basketball Hall of Fame. Like, oh, okay.
That's very underwhelming.
It was the inside of it's pretty cool, but like definitely more I thought at least, basketball displays for kids. You know what I mean? Like, hey, see if you can stand in Shaq's shoe, that kind of thing, right?
Right. So it's the only Hall of Fame of the big 3 sports I haven't been to, so I need to fix that.
So that answers my next question. Baseball Hall of Fame, Cooperstown.
I have been, yeah.
Okay.
I got your text about that. Yeah, it is. Now, as someone who, I was a huge baseball fan as a kid, but I admit I have strayed as an adult, and I haven't followed baseball. It doesn't matter. That place, you feel something when you go
for sure.
There. I thought it was incredible. Yeah.
I will say this, and I think you're going to disagree with me here. I was just simply surprised. Underwhelmed is probably too harsh a word. I was surprised when I went into the enshrinement area of the Baseball Hall of Fame at I was underwhelmed by the plaques themselves. I just always assumed that the player face and hat, because so much is made your entire life. The Baseball Hall of Fame is the most prestigious of the three, and you always hear, like, when he goes into Cooperstown, like, what cap is he going to wear, and et cetera.
Yep.
And then you see the plaque, and you're like, these are you can barely even see the hat. You know what I mean?
You have to read it to know what team, I think.
Correct.
If I recall
correctly. You can barely even tell what hat they're wearing in the bust on the plaques. The Baseball Hall of Fame, to me, if you go to the Football Hall of Fame, the shrine room with the busts, it's like being almost in a mausoleum. Like you're extremely quiet and respectful, and it's very moving. It's incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
But that happened to me. The Football Hall of Fame is a Hall of Fame that happens to have some displays about football. The Baseball Hall of Fame is a museum about an incredibly detailed museum about the history of baseball that happens to then have a Hall of Fame section to it. That's how I took it.
That is true. I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. And as an aside, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I think this was the last time I was there. I walked through that shrine room, shadowing Tony Dungy when he went in, and he had stories about all the guys. It was great. It was unbelievable.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I walked
a little bit of context, right? Pretty cool.
I walked through the Baseball Hall of Fame with Mike Byron, and he once got drunk and puked in a Boston Red Sox hat. So that was like the
we
extent
all have
of
our
my
claim to fame.
Yeah, that was the extent of my enrichment. Okay, two others. Niagara Falls.
Yes, been a long time, but yes.
Okay. And then lastly, Providence, Rhode Island.
Fun fact, I have been there, yes. My brother went to school in Providence, of all places. So I visited a couple times. It's been a long time, and I've driven through there. But
did he go to Johnson? Did he go to Johnson and Wales Providence School of Design or whatever it was, Brown or Providence?
Rhode Island School of Design. And how the hell do you know that?
Rhode Island School of Design. Sorry, if I'm not mistaken, the Rhode Island
school to Brown.
Yes, Rhode Island School of Design is where the Talking Heads met.
Okay, well, there's again, speaking of claim to fame, right? So there you go.
Is that where your brother went, Rhode Island School of Design?
He did. Yep, he did. He and my sister-in-law both.
Providence, extremely underrated. People are going to hear me screaming this from the mountaintops. I thought Providence was a very, very, very cool and quaint town.
Providence is not bad. I've also gone there with the Colts, I should say, by the way, who they do not fly into Boston. They fly into Providence. For the road trips to Foxborough.
Providence Airport, way easier and not far from Foxborough, which Foxborough, by the way, also now, Gillette Stadium, it's been 15 years since I went there. I'm like, what the hell is this? They built it's
Disneyland.
Listen, there is a hospital in the parking lot. I thought to
most
myself,
bizarre thing.
Can you imagine having to go by ambulance to that hospital on game day? Like, what are we doing here, right? literally, it's in the parking lot. It's right there. And then
next to the mall.
There's a mall. It's like the Metropolis Mall in Plainfield is like the mall that's surrounding Gillette Stadium. It's the weirdest thing ever.
Well,
very strange.
Look, Robert Kraft decided this stadium is in the middle of nowhere, and I have to give people a reason to actually come out here because I own all this property. So he decided, let's put up completely random structures, and they'll come. And they do.
I know. But the hospital part is just the one that I thought was super weird. You know what I mean?
The hospital's weird.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, Stephen, appreciate the info on both sides of things, football and basketball today. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
All right, you got it.
All right, Stephen Holder joining us from ESPN.com. By the way, Eddie, it's been delivered. What did you order?
I went with the Korean barbecue salmon today.
Ooh, that sounds good. Salmon?
Yep.
Okay. Do not go in the heat that in the microwave, please. This is the sound of Cluster Truck. I'm opening the bag right now. It is still warm because when you order from Cluster Truck, literally they make it right then. They don't make it and have it ready to go. You order it, they make it, and then boom, it is to you like nearly instantly. So Eddie going with wow, that does look good actually. The Korean, say that again. What you got here? The Korean,
Korean barbecue salmon.
Look at you, man. Eddie Garrison going with the healthy cuisine. I went with the cheese quesadillas. I always do. They are fabulous. Cluster Truck, of course, clustertruck.com. where you can get your lunch options each and every day, and it is made fresh right there when you order it. Okay, the order of the day is the fact that Myles Turner is now going to be a Milwaukee Buck. What does that mean for Indiana in terms of other available options? And what other news has taken place today in free agency? We will unpack all of that next. Myles Turner is on his way to Milwaukee. And I think once the shock wears off for people, most people have the same reaction, which is we should be happy for Myles Turner, honestly. And I know that that sounds crazy. And hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out. Myles Turner came to the Pacers under a unique circumstance. At the time that he was acquired, Myles Turner came into a franchise that still within recency was not used to drafting high. You know, the Pacers, when they took Benedict Mathurin, had not had a player selected in the top 6 since George McLeod, and it had been nearly 30 years. And so to get a player that was drafted, and I can't remember if it was 11th or 13th, Turner, it was somewhere in there, the year that he was selected. But there comes with that, especially for this franchise, this expectation of like, that means boom, this guy's a franchise guy. And when Reggie Miller retired, and by the time the shock kind of wore off that the Reggie era was over with, this is a town and a fan base that was immediately trying to find its new rebound relationship. You'd been married to the same perfect wife for nearly 20 years. And then now all of a sudden it's like you got to start seeing new people. And yes, you had Jermaine and Ron Artest, and that was the new era. And then the brawl happened. And then you had, Mike Dunleavy and, the roster fillers, so to speak. Peja Stojakovic. And the next young face of the franchise was Paul George. And Paul George is here, and he has the injury, and he comes back from it, and then he has the softball tournament, and Kevin Pritchard's there, and all is well and good. And then the next day, Paul George says, you know what, actually, I really want out. And Pacer fans, when that happened, their medicine for that was, yeah, but we have another guy that we just drafted in the top 15 who's a young player, and it's Myles Turner. And all of a sudden, Myles Turner, really, without even asking for it, at a very young age, became the new face of the Pacers and the new promise of the future and the new hope. He was the hope. And it didn't take long before people were like, I don't know, though, maybe they need to, get a wing because they traded Paul George away for Oladipo. Now, all of a sudden, everything's shifting, and Oladipo's the new hope. And Oladipo then gets hurt and goes to Miami and starts doing side stuff and doesn't come back during the playoffs. And then he says, you know what, I kind of want out. And it broke Kevin Pritchard's heart, frankly. But the fan base was like, well, that's okay because at least we still have Myles Turner. And then they end up making moves and trades, and it's like, well, Turner and Sabonis, can they coexist on the floor? I don't mean as guys. And they trade away Sabonis, and people are like, well, I don't know much about this guy they got from Iowa State that was with the Kings, but at least they still have Myles Turner. And then Halliburton comes here, and we know what has happened since then. But what's interesting is with Halliburton, they looked at it and they said, Halliburton has the ability to run at a pace and play a new style that we are going to be the trendsetter. In a copycat league where for a while there everybody went bruising because the Pistons were doing it, and then everybody went let your star do it because the Bulls were doing that, and then everybody went with build a dynasty team or, an all-star team, a big three because Miami did it. And then everybody went with, let's just get spot-up three-point shooters everywhere, Splash Brothers, because the Warriors did it. And the Pacers said, you know what, we're tired of following everybody else's lead. We're going to do it our way. And the way we're going to do it our way is we got a center that can run. And he can block shots, and he can rim protect, and he can then facilitate transition. And we're going to do that. And then guess what? He might be the last one down the floor, but he's going to be trailing back and can pop and hit a three-pointer, and it's Myles Turner. And the way that this team is built is largely based upon Myles Turner, truth be told. And I think what it came down to is then when Halliburton got hurt, everything went out the window in terms of the timeline. And the Pacers had to look at it, and they said, okay, look, we have $19.5 million basically to stay under the cap. And yes, our boss has given us an open check and the go with all, like go for it, thumbs up, seal of approval to go into the luxury tax. And for those that are just joining the program, the luxury tax is this, and that is there is a level that is set. For next year, it's basically $170 million. Your salary can be up to $170 million. You can pay $170 million. Everything above that, you are taxed $1.50 for every dollar you go over. So if they have $19.5 million of margin here, the Pacers, going into next year, and then they know that if they go over that cap, so let's say Myles Turner, if it was going to take $25 million to keep Myles Turner, that's $5.5 million that you're taxed plus $1.50 for every one of those dollars. So another $8 million. So now you're paying a $13.5 million fine for going over. That's just for year one. But then you also have Aaron Nesmith that you're going to have to pay up. Benedict Mathurin, if you want to retain him, that you're going to have to pay up. Nembhard, they're in pretty good shape with. But they had to figure out those numbers. And it was worth going in to the tax and paying the fine to the Indiana Pacers, and they've been given the signed seal of approval so long as the understanding was it was because they were getting ready to turn around and run it right back with the group that came within 3/4 of the NBA title. But as soon as that injury happened to Tyrese Halliburton, at no disrespect or fault of Tyrese Halliburton, it's not his fault. I'm going to say it again. We're going to do it like it's Goodwill Hunting. Son, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It wasn't. But it changes things. Because now, not only do you have a year where you would be paying, let's say, a $13 million fine just to have your team intact for next season, but you don't have it intact on the floor because Halliburton's not there. And then you have the year after that where Halliburton, presumably, it's going to take at minimum a half a year for him just to get in flow. Now you're going and paying even more of a fine. It was worth doing when you knew what you had. But now all of a sudden you were in a situation where you don't want to go in and pay that fine because you know all you're doing is essentially treading water and holding serve. Like I said earlier, it's like if you have a 24-hour sports car race, an endurance race like the Rolex 24, and you have 4 different drivers. The weakest of your 4 drivers, you're wanting him to take that 4-hour stint between midnight and 4 a.m. just so that your star and your anchor drivers can get the proper rest to finish you off and get you to the finish line and try to get to the checkered flag first. But in this situation, you knew going in now, the Pacers without Tyrese Halliburton, it's the midnight to 4 a.m. shift. And you're just asking this roster to hold serve until your anchor guy comes back. That's all well and good until you've got to pay into that tax. I don't think that there was anything egregious. I don't think that there was anything nefarious. I do think that the Pacers probably felt like they had the luxury of time to figure out how to massage some of the numbers with Turner to make sure that they were not too heavily penalized over the cap, not realizing the irony of all ironies, the torn Achilles that started the playoffs for them in terms of Damian Lillard in that series actually then came into play here in the end because the Bucks said, you know what, you don't think that we have the money here to go out and get your center, but we do because we're about to release Damian Lillard, which they did, which then got them flexibility to go out and steal Myles Turner away from Indiana. Now the question becomes, who is the center that Indiana goes out and gets. Because Isaiah Jackson is also a guy that they're going to have to pay money to if they want to retain him, a promising young player who is an athletic big, doesn't have the shot of Myles Turner, but is a defender, can play at the rim, can play above the rim, and he is somebody that they are familiar with. Now, you don't know how healthy he is. He's also coming off an Achilles. Then you have Tony Bradley, who you brought back, for pennies on the dollar. I'm saying in relation to contracts sought elsewhere. And DeAndre Ayton is still out there. He has yet to sign anywhere as of right now at this point. Does Indiana now become the Milwaukee with DeAndre Ayton, where they come in at the 11th hour and suddenly pluck him away? That would force them theoretically to go into the tax. But maybe they go into the tax because they say to themselves, look, we were willing to go into the tax for Myles Turner because it gave us a chance to sustain and then in year 2 come right back and try to win a title. Maybe they feel DeAndre Ayton allows them to do that. But that's where things stand.
I've got 3 things to add to this, Jake. So number 1, on the tax front of this, just as a reminder, they can go over the tax to start the season. It's where they finish the year. So they can start the year over the tax, but as long as they finish the year under the tax, it's totally fine. They don't have to pay the penalty. The other part of it is you just let Myles Turner walk for nothing. Like, there was no sign and trade aspect to it. It's a straight up, he's leaving you in free agency, so you get nothing in return. And as a smaller market team, those are the things you have to avoid because you can't let good players walk for free and not get anything in return like the Pacers just did. And then the third...
They may not have wanted to take back. Here's the thing, Eddie. If they did a sign and trade for Myles Turner, then the salaries have to match, so they would be taking back an obligation that perhaps would then again still put them over the cap.
Not in a sign and trade, they don't have to.
If they're willing to go in a sign and trade, though, the salaries that you're bringing back have to match within 80% of the salaries going out.
Not in a sign and trade, because Atlanta did the same thing with Nickeil Alexander-Walker in Minnesota, and they only gave up like a second-round pick in like 2028 or something. It doesn't have to match in a sign and trade.
Okay, I'll trust you on that. And yes, you would assume, but then if they knew that they were not going, maybe Milwaukee just said to themselves, why would Milwaukee do a sign and trade though? You see what I'm saying?
I understand. Well, I'm just saying on the Indiana front, you have to,
of course,
try to get something done to that. And the third part, even though they don't go over the tax, by staying under the tax, the Pacers get some sort of money from the league, because the league will pay teams that don't go over the luxury tax. So not only if they did pay Turner and they stayed over the tax over the course of the season, you're losing out on money that you could potentially be getting back from the league by staying under, because you go into a certain pool of taxpayer money that gets sent and distributed around the league according to however they want to split it up.
By the way, this says here that in an NBA sign and trade, salary matching rules still apply to ensure a fair trade and prevent teams from circumventing the salary cap. So I think I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know. I mean, this stuff gets gray area for sure. But I do think that probably what they were trying to do was avoid taking on additional things that they had to then get rid of. Now, the question becomes, is there a trade, though, to your point, Eddie, still left within them? Kevin Pritchard has been very savvy at trades. We'll ask Scott Agness to clarify some of that as well, because he's going to join us coming up in 15 minutes. Other side, tickets to give away, Dave Matthews Band. You want to do it next, Eddie?
Sounds good to me.
What number caller?
Ooh, it's a good question. We can determine that during the break.
All right, we'll do Get to Know Your Listener. 239-1070 if on July 11th you would like to see the Dave Matthews Band. always, and admittedly, not necessarily my cup of tea, but I totally get why people love the summer aspect of the Dave Matthews Band. It is a cultural event for certain, taking place July 11th. This is at Ruoff, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So we have tickets to give away. I always think of our friend David Benner, who was a huge fan of the Dave Matthews Band. We will begin with Tom. Tom, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
You know, we can't complain, Tom. Is it still nice out? We're landlocked in here.
Gorgeous.
Is it really? Like
It is.
if you had to, Tom, how old a fella are you?
44.
44. If you had to describe today's weather in terms of like a celebrity female, who would you go with? I mean, is it like Halle Berry gorgeous outside?
Oh yeah, like Kate Winslet, gorgeous.
Okay, fair enough. Tom, are you a fan of the Dave Matthews Band?
You know, I am. I'm more of a fan of going to the shows. I never really cared for them back when I was 20 or so. But I was working it was Verizon back then, and I was working there. And I just had such a great time at the show that kind of made me a fan.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I can appreciate that. When you say you were working, you were doing what? You were slinging beers. You were tearing tickets. You were
working security.
Security. During the time that you were doing security, if you don't mind me asking, Tom, what whose fan base was most raucous?
You know, we did a Poison show one night that got really, really wild.
Okay.
Poison.
Was that the first or second time you'd met JMV? I'm just kidding. Okay.
Right.
Now, Tom, my other question would be this: how long have you been a listener of this program? And it might just be actually that your radio's broken. You know, I'm not certain, but how long have you listened to this show?
Oh, I've listened to you since day one, and I'm not just risen up here.
Okay. And are you? I'd like to know something you like or don't like about this program.
You know, I like the banter, and the off-topic stuff. I can kind of get into that a little bit, just because I think we share a personality and just kind of chat about anything.
Which of the three personalities that I have do we share? I'm just kidding. All right, Tom. I appreciate you playing Get to Know Your Listener here. It's one of our favorite segments of the program, to the chagrin of most.
And kids love it.
Kids do love it. We've had research on this, and that's the number one thing that kids come back with. They love Get to Know Your Listener. So, Tom, we're going to send you on your way. Eddie will get your information. We'll go one more here. We're going to go line 5, Eddie. We'll bookend it. Tyler, what's up?
Hello. Hi, how you doing, man?
You know I'm okay. Tyler, you sound like a younger fella. You a younger guy?
I'm a little bit younger. I'm 28.
28-year-old Tyler. And Tyler, are you native to Indianapolis?
Yes, sir. Born and raised at Fortville, Indiana.
Okay, Fortville. And I'm going to guess that at the age of 28, that puts you in a high school graduating class somewhere around 2015. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
And now, sir's my dad. You can just call me Jake. That's fine. Although I appreciate the respect. 2015, I'm going to guess that you are a graduate of Mount Vernon High School.
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's the Marauders. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you guys ever go out late at night just pillaging stuff?
Oh my gosh, all the time.
That's a requirement of Mount Vernon, right? Tyler, what line of work are you in now? What does life have 28-year-old Tyler doing?
I'm a medical assistant right now at a foot and ankle clinic, but I'm trying to become a firefighter.
Nice. Well, that's certainly admirable work on both counts. Tyler, are you a fan of the Dave Matthews Band?
I'm really just a fan of all music in general, man. I can go out and listen to anything. I love going to shows and just hearing people. So,
Tyler, you sound like an upbeat guy. Like you sound like the kind of guy that's never had a bad day. Like you're just one of those guys that lifts everybody up around you. Is that a fair assessment?
I try my best, yeah.
Okay. Well, Tyler, I'll tell you what. You'll be lifting everybody up on July 11th. Say hi to Tom when you're there because we're going to send you to the Dave Matthews Band. You are on your way with a pair of tickets to go see them at Ruoff on July the 11th. I'm not sure if we are giving away tickets for the rest of the week or if that was a one-day affair, but always appreciate those that call in for that. Did you say Agness at 2 or 2:30, Eddie?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock for Scott Agness. That means Scott Agness is next. breaking news sounder, if you may. This just in, Caitlin Clark has been ruled out for tonight's Indiana Fever Commissioner's Cup Championship game, the final of it between the Fever and Minnesota. Of course, Eddie will be working the pregame and postgame for that broadcast. Things get underway, Eddie, exactly when?
7:45 p.m. Eastern time tonight on The Fan.
Caitlin Clark out for that game. Not out, but in when it comes to this program. Joining us now on the Zeitgeist. That is correct, by the way. I love Rheingeist.
Yes.
Excuse me. What's the word with Sein? Is it like Sein? Not Zeitgeist. There's some word that means like an aura in the world, like a mojo that's going on. Not Schadenfreude, but at any rate, the Rheingeist Brewery guest line. My apologies to Rheingeist there. Truth IPA, one of their best beers that you can get. And, of course, the truth is that Myles Turner is on his way to Milwaukee to play with the Bucks. Scott Agness joining us, Fieldhouse Files. Scott, your reaction first off to the Myles Turner news. Scott Agness completely disappearing. He was so – see, the Zeitgeist – It's the Rheingeist Brewery, I realize. The Zeitgeist, apparently, like the evil spirits of that seem to get him. Okay, now we have Scott. Do we have Scott back? All right, your thoughts, your reaction, Myles Turner news, Scott.
Yeah, we obviously all have to be surprised, Jake. No one expected for necessarily Myles Turner to go elsewhere, but I think the equation entirely changed when Tyrese Halliburton went down with that Achilles injury, and so I'm even more surprised given the comments that Rick Carlisle made on the station here following the season, saying how he was the number one priority. But let's also step back a second. And what haven't we seen or heard, Jake, over the last week since the season ended? Since a special season for this team to highlight, you haven't heard from Rick Carlisle at a postseason press conference. There were no exit interviews. The front office did not talk. That was highly unusual, especially coming off the best season in franchise history in 25 years. And so I wondered if that was something perhaps they wanted to avoid, not have to have any comments on the record or tip their hand about the way in which they were going. But along the same lines, Jake, nobody expected the Bucks or any team to come in here and have reasonable cap space. And so it felt like going into free agency, the Pacers were in a position where you just didn't want to outbid yourself.
Do you think the Pacers got hoodwinked? In other words, do you think they were aware of or thought about the fact that Milwaukee would have that? But are you vacuuming? What's going on here? Are you vacuuming the car, Scott? What's the background noise here?
No, I think that's just an air vent. I'm sitting here in the media room at Target Center up in Minneapolis. I think it's just an air vent.
Gotcha. By the way, Zeitgeist is a time spirit, is what I was thinking of. But with this, as they're sitting there at the negotiating table, do you think the Pacers underestimated Milwaukee or another franchise's desire or ability to create the space to get Myles Turner?
Yeah, it's hard to say at this very moment as we're all trying to get in touch with all the right people here. But I would say in this situation, nobody had cap space except for the Brooklyn Nets, and that continued to dwindle as they continued to make all these deals. And so the Pacers were in a prime position here, and it almost felt like or did feel like a situation where, Jake, both the Pacers needed Myles to fill that center spot because they have no centers right now, basically, and Myles needed the Pacers to come in with a reasonable offer. And so Pacers seemingly made an offer here, but did not need to go into the $28-30 million per range because, again, no one else could even offer close to that. And so this, to me, is also why you hire a great agent. And Myles' agent clearly worked the league, found a situation with Milwaukee, and you could lean into, if you're the Bucks and that agent, some desperation for the Bucks as well. Look, Dame suffered an Achilles injury. He's out for the season. But you have Giannis, and probably the best player that will ever play for this franchise. And so you needed to maximize their situation. And so now when you consider what the Bucks are doing, not only are they paying Myles, whatever it is, $23 million per year on average, 26, but they're also paying Dame here $23 million over the next 5 as they pay him for a contract that he hasn't even started yet, over $112 million. So they're investing $50 million to try to keep Giannis happy and to keep him in Milwaukee.
I was looking, Scott Agness, our guest, Fieldhouse Files. He's on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line. I was looking at the free agency center list for 2026, thinking, well, maybe they just, get through this year and then they go out and with Halliburton coming back, they really cement things by getting somebody. It's a pretty dry list then as well. I mean, Mark Williams is kind of intriguing to me, but outside of that, Chet Holmgren, but he's restricted. I mean, it seems as though they are in a pickle here. Are they going to have to do a trade, or do you just go with Bradley, Bryant, and hope Isaiah Jackson's healthy?
The challenge with that, even considering James Wiseman, is do you really want to invest so much in two guys that are both also coming off Achilles injuries? And they had surgery there in November. So they're like 8 months removed from that right now. Realistically, you want at least 12 going into it. It's one reason why I thought them trading up for that pick in the early second round might have been for a big like Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton, who would have fit in defensively, would have fit in a multitude of ways. But I also understand them going out and getting a guard to help fill some depth there at guard position, knowing that Halliburton's presumably going to be out for all of next season. But all along, it did feel like you would bring back Myles, that you would continue this partnership. I don't think he was necessarily looking to go anywhere. I think we saw in that letter that he wrote in the Players Tribune going into the postseason what it's meant to him, how he felt. This felt like a season where he was both at ease and comfort, and he also had the most joy. And how ironic is it, the time that we all expected for him to come back and to be there was the one time when he does not, through all of these speculations and such. Because realistically, there was one time when they were really going to consider trading him, when they made that offer for Gordon Hayward to the Boston Celtics back, 6 years ago. Outside of that, a lot more of it was media speculation than was truly him being on the trade block. But there's a range of emotions, Jake, and that's the biggest thing I keep coming back to is fans obviously enjoyed this past season. Obviously enjoyed this run to the finals. Didn't even expect that. Then Tyrese goes out. Now you lose your franchise cornerstone in Myles, who has had a fan section at Pacer games all 10 years that he has been there. And now you got to figure out what you do next at center.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were jarred by it today when that news came out about Myles Turner. Scott, in terms of the rest of the roster, let's begin with this. Isaiah Jackson. I think now Isaiah Jackson becomes even that much more important. I don't think he's somebody that's currying a lot of interest elsewhere. I like his skill set, to be honest. Where do things stand in terms of getting him or retaining him? He is an unrestricted, if I'm not mistaken, free agent, but they gave him, a qualifying offer. Explain what that means.
Yeah, a qualifying offer basically provides him with a cap hold, and it's something here where that makes him a restricted free agent. That's the biggest thing. So if someone came in and made him a big offer, the Pacers could match that. That's one of the big things of having his also bird rights as a team that drafted him and he has been with. So the Pacers wouldn't have to worry about losing him without the ability to match. Reality is he's coming off an Achilles injury. He's 8 months removed from that. It was cool to see him over the final couple of practices out there with the team and shooting around and such. But you can't bank on what he will look like come season time here in October, coming off what is the most difficult injury, I think, to rehab back from. I think at best you could count on him to be your backup center. You can't count on him just yet to move into those center minutes. So to me, you're really looking to go after that starting center. The Pacers also picked up the team option on Tony Bradley's contract. However, we should note it is a non-guaranteed deal. So by doing so, he remains in team control at this juncture. However, they could waive him today, tomorrow, in 6 months, or 5 months or so, and not have an obligation to his contract outside of that. But to me, right now, you canvass what else is out there. I know a lot of people have mentioned DeAndre Ayton. Do you try to bring that and make that happen after they issued him an offer statement, which he signed a couple years ago? I just don't see that. But what they will have at their disposal, my understanding is they will have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception to use. So they will have a little bit of money. That should be about $14 million or so, depending on how their cap sheet shakes out. But they don't have a ton of money, and there's obviously limited inventory of centers on the market right now.
I got this question via text. I will field it right straight to you, Scott. It did kind of make me smirk. Hey, Jake, what about Happy Guy from IU? I mean, Thomas Bryant. Thoughts on Bryant? I have my own thought, but you give me your thought first.
Well, first of all, the fact that he was played off the court in the last couple of rounds would be concerning in terms of him being a starting center. To me, I would have no problem bringing him back again on a minimum deal as a backup, as a second or third string center. But what we're talking about here is the starter. And for a team that should absolutely contend for a playoff spot and probably be in that 5 or 6 range, depending on how these different rosters pan out over the next couple of weeks, I would not feel comfortable with him being your starter. Backup, absolutely.
My only thing with Bryant, and you tell me if I'm being too harsh here, Scott, I think at times, while I love his spirit and enthusiasm, there were times on the floor where I thought his emotions were a bit of a liability.
I would say just a couple of times, but I don't think they outweighed the positive emotions that he expressed as well. I mean, everyone you talked to on that team, as I did during the finals, was thrilled with having him being part of the team and having him lead kind of the bench mob that they had there when the starters were making big runs. And so I think he was much more of a positive impact than the couple of times when the emotions did get the best of him. I feel like they needed that emotional spark, something maybe that they lacked a little bit until he arrived.
Okay, then let me get also to this one, and that is Benedict Mathurin. To me, Mathurin now suddenly he's got all the control in his hands instead of the other way around. Because if I'm Mathurin and they came to me and said, hey, listen, we want to pick up a team option. If I'm Mathurin, I'm going, look, you're in a situation now where I've got a chance to start 70 games and average 20 a game, and somebody might give me a buku bucks. I'm not signing anything right now. Your thoughts?
Completely agree right there. I think right now I would pencil him as your starting shooting guard, playing alongside Andrew Nembhard, who will take over more of the point guard responsibilities. And so, he will be extension eligible this summer, which he was not last year, unlike Andrew Nembhard, because he was a second-round pick. But I think given how many teams are positioning themselves, Jake, to have money next offseason, targeting 2026 and such, if I'm Mathurin, you are gambling a little bit, right? Sometimes you want to take what is known and to get that contract up front, given potential injuries and such, given the load that he's expected to have to carry next season. But at the same time, Mathurin absolutely strikes me as a guy who wants to bet on himself, and given the likelihood of more minutes coming and a greater role, I think it would be better for him to do that. Now, again, he would probably be a restricted free agent for that, meaning the Pacers could match that, but it would help up what his potential ceiling could be in terms of his next contract. You know he's going to want max or close to a max. It's just at this juncture, is he worth that?
Do you think Tyrese Halliburton was kept abreast of or in the loop from the Pacers standpoint on what was happening with Myles Turner?
I don't know for certain, obviously, but I would be surprised if he was not. This is a team that communicates with him a great deal. I would be surprised, Jake, if he was not on a text with Rick or Chad over the last couple of days. And along the same lines, why they don't want to involve him or put him in the situation to share his opinion on that. He's also a guy that has talked before about how much he watches the college basketball game. So going into the draft, he likes to share his input and share what he has seen and those sort of things. But I don't know. But yes, I would absolutely be surprised if he was not given a heads up.
You are in Minnesota, I would presume, for the Fever and the Minnesota Lynx tonight. That is the final game of the Commissioner's Cup in the WNBA. No Caitlin Clark. We now know that officially. That changes things for Indiana. How, and can you update us on the latest regarding Caitlin Clark?
Yeah, I'm glad the Fever made that official that she will not play tonight. Based on everything we have seen in the last 2.5 days, it was no surprise, Jake. She had been limited in practice each of the last couple of days, did non-contact work, did shooting and looked fine there, was wearing tights presumably to help with the compression and keep the leg and groin area warmed, as she deals with this type of injury. But there's no reason you need to rush back, even though there is this prize money on the line, something these players have talking a great deal about, much like the NBA Cup has served as a great motivator here. But not much changes for the Fever, I don't think, because they've had to play without Caitlin over the last couple of days and for 7 games in total. I would expect Ari McDonald to get the start once again, as she has provided a nice jolt of emotional energy, and on court it allows for them to kind of play a hybrid style of what they do with Caitlin and without, something that they weren't able to do before they were able to sign her and bring her back on the team. But man, this Lynx team, so good. Just 2 losses on the season. One of those kind of a fluke loss to Washington when Nafisa Collier missed a game due to a back injury. But this team was obviously in the WNBA Finals last year, really should have won it. That's probably a conversation for a different time. But the Fever, this, to me, it's much like the Pacers. It's remarkable, Jake, how much they kind of resemble one another. To me, this reminds me of where the Pacers were a couple years ago in Vegas in the Cup Final. And for a group that hadn't won anything, that hadn't played in the postseason, I kind of see that as a similar case here with the Fever. And the fact that they are here is a positive sign. Now the thing with all these players right now, Jake, is all of them are talking about how they got to be better, how the team's got to be better. They are not proud of their level of performance collectively or individually. And so that's what we're looking to see here in the final 8 games leading to All-Star break.
Scott, have we realistically gotten a chance to assess where they are, though? Because it seems as though when you're talking about the Fever, it would be easy to say this far through that they should have more wins, but at the same time, from a health standpoint, have they truly gotten an idea as to who and what they are?
No, I don't think so. And that's the encouraging thing here. All along, even before all those number of issues, Stephanie White has emphasized how let's get to All-Star break and then hit the ground running. You had an entirely new coaching staff, essentially. At the time, you brought in 6 new players originally. Then the whole thing with DeWanna Bonner happened. Stephanie White's missed a couple of games due to personal reasons. Caitlin Clark, no one imagined a player who has never missed time here in the last, 6-7 years, since she's a teenager, is now missing a significant portion of the schedule. And so there's just been an influx of different things. Even Demirs Dantas, a backup center, is away right now. At least you saw this coming, obviously. But because of all those factors and more, Jake, no, we have not gotten a good indication of the potential of this team and the makeup. They're still very much having to figure it out on the fly. They just completed a stretch with 5 games in 7 days, a 3-game trip out west, and then their body clocks are all thrown off. And so it will be good after this game, Jake, for them to go back to Indy because they'll have a 5-game homestand. Several of the players today were saying, I can't wait to sleep in my own bed and get back into a normal routine again.
All right, I want to know, since you've been in the Twin Cities, if you've done anything fun aside from covering basketball.
I have not. I got in late last night, had dinner at the hotel, and then came over to the arena here today. So maybe tomorrow before my afternoon flight, I'll be able to walk around, but very unlikely given the fact that NBA free agency is in full swing right now. It would have been great to get to Target Field for a Twins game, although I think they're out of town right now. But
have you been to Mall of America?
I have, yes, many years ago.
I could just tell you this, not that I would know this from personal experience. The Mall of America parking is designed, there's state names, like wherever you park, it's, there's a different state. If you go to the section of the parking garage that is Indiana and then welcome people to Indiana as they get out of their cars, people think it's weird, apparently. I'm just telling you that.
You don't know by experience or anything, do you?
No, not at all. Yeah, there's a guy that's just standing, he's walking up and approaching people's cars, welcoming them to Indiana. Yeah, people think it's weird.
And then he's telling me all about the history of the state. Like, what is this? Is
that's exactly
this is
right.
Hoosier hospitality
we became
in
a state in
Minneapolis?
1820. Thank you for coming in. Actually, 1816, I believe. All right, Scott, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy the Twin Cities.
You got it. By the way, I should mention one of our own, Michael Grady, is on the call for Prime Video tonight, so that'll be cool as well for Indy fans.
I saw that it is Prime Video where the game can be seen. It can be heard right here on this radio station as well with Eddie Garrison pre and post game. Appreciate it, Scott.
You bet. Thanks, Jake.
Minnesota, by the way, Minneapolis in particular, a great city this time of year. I don't know that I'd want to be there in the dead of winter, but then again, the dead of winter here is not much better either. You know what I mean? I mean, it's all relative, I guess. Eddie, have you been to the Twin Cities?
I have not.
I'm curious what's now in the Mall of America, because if you look at malls now, okay, and I got to give a lot of credit to Bath and Body Works. These people are going down with the ship on all of them, right? I mean, literally, you go through any mall and there's like a poo emoji pillow kiosk, and then one guy that fixes cell phones and one guy that puts his batteries in watches, 19 candy stores, and then Bath and Body Works. Like these people are literally, they're like that fella back with Mount St. Helens that refused to move. And I like Bath and Body Works. I mean, they got good stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love it, and I love the scent of it when you walk past. But they get a lot of credit. But I'm curious, in the Mall of America, like, is it just 42 Bath and Body Works in there? Is that what it is?
There's probably a Yankee Candle.
Yankee Candle, also a stubborn one that refuses to go away.
Well, you also have Pink and Victoria's Secret. Those are in like every mall too.
Now, I'm not going to say any names, but let me tell you what happened to me once at a Victoria's Secret. I'm saying no names, but I can tell you, 27 or 28 years ago at the Fashion Mall, Victoria's Secret was up the escalator there. It may still be there. I don't know, like above where Tiffany is. And I was doing Christmas shopping with, it was like a week before Christmas, and I was with a very, very good friend of mine who was a coworker at the time and is still like a brother to me. And we're shopping, and he says, hey, we got to go in Victoria's Secret. And at the time, I was dating a girl at the time. I still remember I bought her actually two things of like a hand cream lotion that she likes, strawberries and whatever, from Victoria's Secret. I almost said the guy's name. So my friend is dating two girls. He wasn't overly serious with either, but he had two girls that he was seeing at the time. So he buys two different gifts at Victoria's Secret, okay? We walk up to the counter, and I buy my stuff, and I'm standing off to the side, and he's now buying his stuff. And we're the only two guys in the store, mind you, okay? And the woman at Victoria's Secret, and this is a packed, like 5 days before Christmas, absolutely zoo, packed mall, epicenter of mall dominance era, etc. And right when there was literally a mall-wide lull in conversation and you could hear a pin drop, I kid you not, literally, it was almost like the scene in the Ellen DeGeneres show where she leaned into the airport microphone and everyone heard what she had to say. It was like that. The cashier says to my friend, "Would you like a gift receipt?" At which point he, without even thinking, says, "Yes, but two different ones, please, because they're going to two different women." And the second he said it, a record player stopped. Everyone in the mall looked at us and got out their pitchforks and devil horns and everything else and absolutely scorned him. And I just grabbed my little thing of strawberry lotion and just slinked off. I was like, "You're on your own on this one, bud."
You can't forget the pretzel stores either. You got Auntie Anne's and you got Wetzel's Pretzels.
And then isn't there another pretzel, a latecomer to the pretzel party lately?
I'm not sure. Oh, you can't forget, this is an up-and-coming, beverage of consumption, Jake. Boba teas.
Yes, very big in malls. Yes, and there's
and
usually
smoothies.
Some sort of a cookie place usually still around too, right? And then there's always one guy that has either like a train or some sort of animals that you can rent and ride around on at like 0.5 miles per hour.
And you've always got those massage chairs or like a massage place in there.
The Philadelphia airport has those. When Shannon and I came back from our last trip, we had literally like a 3.5-hour layover in the Philadelphia airport. And I have something like $142 in charges on that massage chair because we sat in it for 3 straight hours.
Did you fall asleep? Is that why?
I just kept putting it back in. Well, what else do you want to do now? I don't know. You want to do that? Sure, yeah, great. Let's do that. We've already had 7 Auntie Anne's pretzels from down there. Let's go ahead and have another massage in the massage chair. Pacers got a massage. What they're going to do at the center position. That is the big news of the day. But there is still other topic of discussion when it comes to this program on this Tuesday here on the first day of July. I'll let you know what that is when we come back. I had asked the Twitter question yesterday, and have found the answer very interesting. And by the way, if you're just joining the program,
Where have you been?
We've been talking a lot about Myles Turner over the course of today. I'm sure you have heard by now, Myles Turner on his way to Milwaukee after what was thought to be a foregone conclusion that he would sign with Indiana, although admittedly when last night, came and went, you're doing like the Twitter refresh, like Myles Turner news, like what's going on? And now we have that answer. So the question yesterday that I asked, because of the fact that and we're closing in now on, actually the results are final here on my survey on Twitter. If Indy was given an expansion franchise in one league and you had to choose, and I picked these two leagues, I mean, several people were like, duh, Major League Baseball. I'm like, I get it, except for I picked the two leagues that right now are the two that Indianapolis is linked to possibly be or have a chance at expansion. Major League Soccer or the NHL. 2,927 votes. Eddie, would you like to guess which the winner was?
I'm going to go with a National Hockey League team. Oh, the good old hockey game.
Would you like to guess of the and I'm not telling you if you're incorrect or correct, but of the 2,927 people that voted, would you like to guess how many voted for the winner? So
68. 68%? Yes.
77% say NHL.
Oh, wow.
The problem with NHL would be this. Number one, and I don't know this for certain. It was told to me, and I'm going to believe it to be true, that Gainbridge Fieldhouse, after the renovations, is no longer hockey available, essentially. I looked it up, and in the NHL, the average hockey arena, the smallest hockey arena in the NHL, I believe, is New Jersey, and it's like 15,700 or 16,000. Gainbridge Fieldhouse, after the renovations, I think is right at around 18,000, and that would be a little bit less if you put hockey dimensions in. So the fact that, number one, that is a challenge, but number two, and more importantly, I don't know that NHL is sustainable here because it would be in the same season as both the Pacers and Colts. Major League Soccer predominantly would be in summer, and so therefore I think it would be you have a better chance of it surviving, but you'd have to build a stadium. And then we get into the whole conversation about the MLS and the expansion and the city's bid for that. And, of course, that was under still existing Mayor Hogsett, but, now he's got a lot more going on. And, so I don't know where that stands. But when I saw that the NHL expansion was Indianapolis, New Orleans, Austin, there was one other city, and I can't remember now what it was, Atlanta. And I thought, well, Atlanta already had a team. New Orleans, I can't imagine it working. But Austin, Texas seems to be like it would be a very, very safe thing, right? I think people would love the hockey if it came here. I just think it would be hard. Can you imagine, like, if the Pacers had games on Tuesday and Thursday, and then the Racers had a game on Friday? I mean, there are a lot of people that, you'd have – it's the same fan base by and large, right?
I don't know if it is. I mean, I'm sure there is some crossover there, Jake, but I know the Fuel do really well with attendance.
They do.
And that's
true.
During the course of the Pacer season as well.
But the Fuel is not – it is, but here's the thing. The Fuel, number one, different area.
Agreed.
Different arena. But number two, totally different price structure too. You know what I mean? Like the money that would have to be spent to go to NHL games on top of going to NBA games, I would think would be a lot. That would be the challenge there. I would love it. I mean, I think it'd be cool.
It's not shocking to me now that I think about it, just the splits and it being so dominated by people wanting an NHL team over an MLS team, just because I just don't think there's a market in this city for an MLS team. Like, I don't know if there's enough fan interest and fan intrigue.
Here is the challenge that I think MLS gets into. The challenge with the MLS is this. And admittedly, and I have been totally anti-soccer guy in the past. I'm not that. I'm not. But by and large, and hear me out here, soccer's been the sport of the future in this country since 1978. We're always 2 weeks away from soccer being the next big thing. And there is no doubt, in comparison to, say, my childhood, that soccer now for young people is it was an almost non-existent. Soccer was the sport when I was a kid, and it still, to a great extent, is this for young people. Soccer is a wonderful sport for young kids in particular, because it is the one sport that if you have a child that is not overly athletic or that does not do well with focus on them or has, and I'm not saying this, I'm being totally serious and compassionate when I say it, or has like ADHD, or you simply have a child that is not into sports, but you want them to learn the benefits of teamwork and practice and things like that. Soccer is a wonderful sport because it is a sport that your child can play and they never have to go in the batter's box by themselves. They never have to go to the free throw line by themselves. They never have to get like collision contact like you do in football. And I know there's contact in soccer, but you get what I'm saying. It has a lot of benefits without some of the detriment that can take place for other youth sports. And because more and more people are leaning towards that and having their children play it at young ages, you are introducing younger people to soccer more so than you were 40 years ago. No question. And in addition to that, high-level professional soccer has become a spectator sport in the United States to a great extent, and there is a very clear dividing line. It's like 40 and under. People that are 40 and under are all in on soccer, and they watch it because they've grown up in the things that I just got done talking about. But those people, like if you look like yourself, Eddie, you are like a generation behind me, right? You and Jimmy, you guys follow soccer. Jimmy in particular followed soccer avidly, had his favorite team, etc. As do a ton of people in their teens, 20s, and 30s right now in the United States. I don't argue that at all. The thing is, they have a little bit of a highbrow snob aspect to themselves in the fact that they are watching, and they're watching Premier League, right?
Yeah.
Are you a soccer fan? I love soccer. Man, I can't get enough of who's Man U? Who's your favorite team? Man City? Who's your favorite team? Everton? Yeah, my buddy John over there's a Tottenham fan. Go Spurs. Yeah, right. What about LA Galaxy? Huh? What about Miami? Yeah, I mean, great. So, they got Messi. But I'm still at heart a Liverpool fan. I'm still at heart a, Sunderland fan, whatever. So the challenge with soccer in this country now is the fact that while it's great that you have this groundswell of support for the sport and interest in it, the MLS is still seen by a large part of its base that you are trying to buy into getting a team that would make it worth the $1 billion expansion fee to bring here, and yet people still see it as kind of AAA. And they still see it as like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not the cool. I mean, to some extent, with people, like in terms of racing, people here love IndyCar, but F1 has become so big because of the reality show and the movie and everything else that it is created for IndyCar somewhat of a challenge because you want to tap into that F1 audience, but then there's like this kind of snobbery about the IndyCar side of it. And that's I think the challenge that it runs into and whether or not it's cost feasible.
I think the snobbery side of it is on the F1 side rather than the IndyCar side.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
I
misunderstood you.
No, F1 fans look at IndyCar with a snobbery, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of the same thing.
Even though the product of IndyCar is much, 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 much better than
no question
Formula One.
No question. I mean, I would obviously agree with you. And the versatility of racing as well.
I mean,
All
like any driver can win an IndyCar race. In Formula One, you're going to get one of 4 guys.
Formula One is much more predicated on the ingenuity of the automobile as opposed to the talent of the driver, in my opinion. We'll get back into Myles Turner, and John will join us for the handoff next. So now let me ask you this question, Eddie. You've seen Forrest Gump, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
If you remember in Forrest Gump when Forrest decides to go for a run.
Which run?
I just felt like running. And before you know it, he's running across the country and whatever else. Now, the one thing about Forrest Gump that is kind of weird is, and it took me the 15th time of watching the movie before I came to this epiphany. But when he goes back and he goes to Jenny's house and she's like, yeah, I kept a scrapbook. And she has a scrapbook of like, he's on the front cover of Running magazine and he's on the front, his relationship with Jenny's and all the tabloids. And he made the news and he was an All-American at Alabama and he mooned the president. He got the Presidential Medal of Free, not the Presidential Medal, but the Congressional Medal of Honor. And he was on the Dick Cavett show. And yet he's sitting on this park bench at the end and like no one knows who he is. By like the fifth story, when that old lady had been like, you know what, I do remember you. But nonetheless, I digress. When he's running through the desert and he stops and the guy goes, he's going to say something. And he turns around and says, I think I'll go home now. And everybody sits around and then you hear the one guy go, now what are we supposed to do? I kind of feel like that right now with the NBA free agency.
Yeah.
Like, well, now what are we supposed to do?
Like the Will Smith in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Yes.
Stand in the living room?
Yes.
Looking around?
I mean, what's the next big domino? DeAndre Ayton? Is that the next big storyline that we're watching now intently? I mean, it's a pretty dry year in terms of free agency. And, whoever would have guessed that I guess that's the ultimate compliment for the Pacers is the fact that the Pacers are, their player is the main headline storyline of free agency 2025. In this case, the bad news being that the player that people loved is gone in Myles Turner. And yes, I think Myles Turner is, I know that he became a polarizing figure and a popular whooping boy for the fan base here. And a lot of that is because of expectation, pressure, or title put on him that he didn't ask for in terms of being the face of the franchise. Because we were so desperate for it, and we thought it was going to be Paul George, and then we thought it was going to be Oladipo, and we thought it was going to be Sabonis, and we thought it was going to be Artester Jermaine, and, we wanted so badly. And he played 708 games. He was the longest tenured Pacer at the time, to today until that deal came along with Milwaukee. And Milwaukee made room for him by releasing Damian Lillard, who, again, I go back to the irony of the Pacers off-season or postseason of 2025 was bookended by two boulder-in-the-stream, path-changing Achilles injuries. First with Damian Lillard, which didn't seem like that was going to impact Indiana, other than the fact that maybe it helped the Pacers win that series against Milwaukee. They would have anyway. But how did Milwaukee manage to swoop in when nobody was looking and steal Myles Turner at the last minute? Because they freed up the cap space by releasing Damian Lillard, which they could do because he's not going to play for a year. And then you have the other side of it, which is the Tyrese Halliburton Achilles injury, which changed everything. I said yesterday 20 times, that injury changed everything. And what it changed was the Pacers' feeling of obligation of going into the luxury tax, meaning paying the penalty for being over the salary cap, which I think they would have gladly done if they knew that they were bringing back a team that was probably next year going to be a front runner to win the title. But without Halliburton there, you now are in flux or in jeopardy or in question mark, not just for next season, but probably the first half of the 26-27 season as well. And so do you want to go and continue paying out the wazoo for a team that is still sitting there just waiting to hold serve until Halliburton comes back, and even then you don't know? The question now becomes, who is your center? Okay, you got Bradley. Okay, if you want, you can re-sign Bryant, and you have Isaiah Jackson at the very least that is a restricted free agent, and you hope that Isaiah Jackson can be a player for you, and I do think he is a good player, but he's not the offensive player that Myles Turner is. What Turner brings to the table in terms of his three-point shooting and his ability defensively is extremely rare. And I know that Pacer fans wanted to sit here and say, like in the postseason, that he was too soft or he disappeared. But guess what? Milwaukee didn't seem to have any problem jettisoning and releasing Damian Lillard to go out and get him. And what else is Milwaukee trying to do? Milwaukee is trying to keep Giannis happy to keep him there. And they must think the world of Myles Turner if that's the guy that is going to be able to let them do both. What does that tell you about Myles Turner? I don't know Myles Turner personally well, but I know this. You know when I'm most interacted with him? I'm most interacted with Myles Turner annually at I forget the name they give it, but the Pacers Thanksgiving dinner. And I believe he was actually one of the main sponsors and organizers of that from a player's standpoint for many years. He did a ton in this community. I get it. I understand why people are upset that he left. But if the Pacers came to him and said, look, for right now, Myles, the best we can do is to offer you $20 million a year for 3 years at $60 million. And the Milwaukee Bucks came and said, we'll give you 4 years at $107 million. Everybody right now that thinks that Myles Turner is a traitor, and I'm not trying to condemn the fan base or anything else or poo-poo on people's poo-poo parade, but everybody that is upset with Myles Turner, if there are people that are, for leaving and feeling like he's some sort of a traitor for going to the Milwaukee Bucks, are the same people that tomorrow, if your place of employment offered you a transfer or a promotion to move to Peoria for an extra $30,000 a year, you're gone in a heartbeat. It's just the reality of that business and the way things work. J&V is in studio. He has arrived. Somebody called in earlier and asked what your thought was going to be on Myles Turner. And I said,
you
well,
want to hear it?
Tune in at 3.
I want to hear it. Yeah, 3 o'clock. Well, this is your show right here. This is not mine.
I know,
so
but I said
I'm excited. Are you excited? I'm very excited.
Look, I'm happy for the guy, and I hope in time people can be, because I think
some jackasses are mad. Oh, I can't, big middle finger. Yeah, whatever. You guys and your middle. Yeah, here's where you can shove your middle finger. Okay.
He's been a great player here, or a very good player at the very least, and but more importantly, I think he's been a great citizen and part of this community. And it's disappointing. It's disappointing to not see this group get an opportunity to run it back en masse. But John, the reality is, when that injury happened, be it fair or not, and I'm not trying to cast stones on, but the reality is that the timelines and the way you go about things changed. It just did.
Yeah, well, it is. Why do you need Pascal Siakam now?
Eddie mentioned that earlier.
What do you need Pascal Siakam?
Eddie mentioned that earlier.
What's he going to be, 33 when Halliburton gets back?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you get – and
I'm a big fan of everybody over there, but I sat here all year long and preached team this and team that and team effort. And I know the magnitude of losing Halliburton, but as soon as he goes out, you're going to scrub the mission here. That's what you do. Team.
I wonder.
Team effort. Great.
I wonder, John, if the one thing, and we'll probably never know this, did Milwaukee completely play them? Did they underestimate Milwaukee's ability to come in based on Milwaukee's own dealing with a torn Achilles and the flexibility that gave them? Did the Pacers underestimate Milwaukee's ability to come in and swoop him away?
You lose a 10-year player who, regardless of what he did, and he sucked offensively in the finals, but helped get you to Game 7 of the finals. He was a part of it, no matter what anybody wants to say. I don't care what anybody says. And he gets you to Game 7 of the finals along with this team. And your rival gets him now.
I know.
So, and people say, well, it's like I saw some jackass say something like, it's going to be interesting to see him not get spoon-fed by Halliburton. Well, no, he's going to get spoon-fed by Giannis. Giannis is going to take on quadruple coverage and going to kick out. And, if Myles does what he didn't do in the finals, it'll work out. I mean, listen, it's just another version of Brook Lopez is what's going on. Brook Lopez goes to the Clippers. Right? Myles is going to the Bucks. I don't want to hear this complete level of BS about team. If you're TJ McConnell, what is he, 34, 35? What do you think about this? Oh,
well,
cool.
But again,
okay, great.
Did Indiana? The question is this: did Indiana let him walk, or were they?
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean?
Either way, right? Doesn't matter. At the end result, you lose. What do you think the players think about that?
Well, that's
what do you think these guys think about that?
Or Halliburton? Was Halliburton?
Hey, we just went 7 games in the NBA. I'm Tyrese Halliburton. I just busted my ass, and I'm done for the season for this. So I can't play. So now you got to pull the plug, huh? Okay, sounds good.
Then the question
clearly
becomes,
I'm not going to be talking to anybody from over there for a minute.
Question then becomes: Is losing Turner, in fact, the definition of pulling the plug? And that's also up for discussion.
Well, what are we thinking about here? Eddie, give us some pivot options right here. Give us a 5. Give us a pick and pop specialist right here. I'm sorry, they need rebounds. No, they didn't need rebounds. The rebounds weren't the problem. It was turning the ball over and points off turnovers. That was the problem in Game 7. So give me some good pivot options here.
I wish I could, John. I wish I could.
You don't have anything?
Nope.
I love Isaiah Jackson. I cannot wait to see him in a pick and pop situation. That's going to be good.
Well, I think Jackson's a really good player, but he does not have the offensive shooting ability that Turner does, right?
Yes.
All right, John's up next. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow, and we thank you for listening today to Query & Company.
See you, fellas.